you have a engaging session. I'll just share my screen. So I hope the screen is visible to everyone. I hope I am audible clearly. Um, I'll
Yes,
just take you through a couple of housekeeping rules. Please keep yourselves on mute. There will be opportunities for you throughout the session to unmute yourselves and ask questions. Only at that point, unmute yourselves. If you have a question as we go along, please put the question in the Q&A section. There's a specific box for questions. Put your questions over there, and Ishani will keep looking at that. And if there's something that needs to be addressed before I move along, she'll bring my attention to it. Use the chat function to respond. There are a couple of places where I will ask you to put in your responses, to type in your responses. Use the chat function for that. You can also use emojis, to raise your hand if you have a question and you want to unmute yourself, or thumbs up to show that you've understood something. And if you have any technical issues, Ishani is there to sort of help you sort it out. Also, this is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you, so don't worry about that. So we'll just dive right in to the session. But, let's just start with a little bit of interaction. If How many of you have actually seen the humanities curriculum? If you could share your thoughts in the chat box. How many of you have seen it? How many of you are using it? Just put your thoughts into the chat box. Okay. So it seems that there are some of you who are familiar with the inquiry approach, and there are some of you that are new to the subject. Is there anyone who would like to unmute and share their thoughts about the humanities curriculum? Not yet. Okay. So we'll move along, and at a later point, maybe once you are a little more familiar, we can stop and share thoughts. So the webinar today is divided into these sections, and it's actually going to be a very comprehensive overview of the entire curriculum. We're going to look at what is it that the curriculum aims to do, how is the curriculum structured, how can it be delivered. We look at what are the resources available to support teachers, since this is a new way to approach humanities. It's a different approach. So there's a lot of resources to support teachers and take them through this integrated humanities curriculum. We will look at active learning because the entire curriculum is based on the premise of active learning. And we will look at how active learning can sort of be incorporated into your classes, into the inquiry approach to deliver the curriculum. We'll take a look at ideas for assessment and planning. And then we look at what are the PD opportunities available to help teachers develop their practice. So, in a nutshell, this is what we're going to discuss today. So, by the end of the session, you will have an overview of the humanities curriculum. You will become more confident in using the digital resources on how to, prepare yourselves to teach the curriculum. You will know how to plan and where to get further support. And the most important, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So let's just dive right in. What is it that the curriculum aims to do? Why has Cambridge created an integrated humanities curriculum? They could have just as easily created a history curriculum and a geography curriculum and kept them separate. Why have an integrated humanities curriculum? So the aim is Yes, to develop curiosity about the world, to develop knowledge, understanding, and skills that can be applied across subjects, not just in the humanities, but also across other subjects, transferable skills, to develop effective communication skills, and to help students develop their understanding of context, personal context, local context, and global contexts. But the reason why it is integrated is to help students make connections, to see how the world works, how the world changes, to understand how these concepts, these very broad concepts, can be applied across disciplines. And it is to enable them to develop a worldview, a holistic worldview. So that's the reason why they have created it as an integrated curriculum rather than as two discrete subjects. Now, if you look at the Cambridge Learner attributes, which we call them RISER, where we're trying to create responsible, innovative, confident, engaged, and reflective learners. The Cambridge Learner attributes are a very important part of the approach to the humanities curriculum. So, is it that it's, like the chicken and the egg question? Would the humanities curriculum develop the attributes? Or do you already need these attributes to do the humanities curriculum? Which do you think it is? If someone could unmute themselves and answer this question. There really aren't very many of us on the call. It's a small enough webinar that we can make it interactive. So, would anyone like to hazard a guess? Okay. So, just a minute, I'll go back to my screen. So, actually, it is definitely the humanities curriculum helps develop the learner attributes. And we'll take a look at how that happens. Just a minute. Just give me a minute. This seems to have got stuck. I'm going to reshare my screen. So it is both, because you can see that through the humanities curriculum, you can develop the learner attributes. For example, when a learner is collaborating in inquiries, when they are developing an understanding of the broader concepts, they learn to demonstrate empathy, they form independent opinions, they take ownership of their learning. All of that makes them responsible learners. When they're actually engaging in inquiry, when they are understanding how to take up an unfamiliar, a new topic, how to go deeper into it. They become critical thinkers, flexible thinkers. They become innovative learners. Once they develop a secure worldview, once their understanding of the world is developed, once they develop the ability to hold their own assumptions and accept others' assumptions as also being right. And they learn to look at these assumptions critically. They become confident. Curiosity is a very big part of the inquiry cycle, and it leads to a deeper understanding. The entire inquiry approach leads to a deeper understanding. Learners become more engaged because they take ownership of their own learning. The entire inquiry approach is learner centric, so they are more engaged. and they become very reflective because if you look, once we come to the inquiry approach, reflection is actually integrated into the entire inquiry approach. They are constantly reflecting. So that attribute is also developed. So if you deliver the humanities curriculum the way it is meant to be taught, definitely it is a great opportunity for schools to develop the learner attributes in each child. But having said that, if you have learners who already have the Cambridge learner attributes, it just becomes that much easier to deliver the humanities curriculum. First of all, learners are able to express their opinions clearly and confidently. If they are responsible, they can engage with independent inquiry. Less teacher hand holding is required. They can function a little more independently. If they are reflective, they will develop very mature worldviews. And they will also develop the ability to accept the worldviews of people who think differently. If they are innovative, they will develop a solution oriented approach. And if they are engaged, obviously, they will make positive contributions to the classroom. So the two do go hand in hand. But having said that, it's not as if you need learners who have all the Cambridge attributes already developed in order to do the humanities curriculum. The humanities curriculum is a great way to develop these learner attributes. So, would anyone like to share here about how, if you have noticed any learner, how have the humanity develops been the learner attributes been developed, either through the humanities curriculum or otherwise? If you have not started teaching the humanities curriculum, if you have other ways in which learner attributes have been developed, if you could share that. If you don't feel like unmuting, please put your answers in the chat box. You could share your responses there. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to share your responses in the chat box about how your school or you in your classroom help develop the learner attributes. Shani, are there any responses yet in the chat box?
No, ma'am, not as of now.
Okay.
There's also one question like, can you repeat the question once again?
So I would like you to please share in the chat box any example of how you have developed the Cambridge learner attributes in your learner. Learning
Uh,
by doing. So they did map work on the smartboard, which helped them develop confidence. Great. Learning by doing is a wonderful way of developing confidence. Any other responses? Anything else that others have done to develop any of the Cambridge learner attributes? Yes, continuous encouragement is great, and silent opportunity is given to those who are introverted. Wonderful. Yes. Giving them a topic to research, that I suppose that is what develops their communication skills and helps them adjust with teammates. Great. So these are all conducting surveys. Kinesthetic learning works brilliantly with some learners, yes, right. Conducting surveys in the house, in school, yes, great. So all of these sort of activities help develop the learner attributes. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll move along to take a closer look at the curriculum itself. Now, the humanities curriculum is presented in strands. So there are three strands: people, past, and places. People relates to the subjects of economics, sociology, psychology. The past relates to history and places relates to geography. Now, in a very mainstream setup, in a traditional school setup, we are used to thinking of these as discrete subjects. And we are not typically used to thinking of economics and sociology and psychology being done in primary and middle school. But in the integrated humanities curriculum, these are incorporated because it is not really possible to study history without knowing a little bit of economics. It is not possible to study history without geography. So, all of these subjects, because these boundaries that we create are actually man-made. Human beings have created these boundaries between subjects. Knowledge is actually a composite whole. If you are looking at the history of India, you cannot understand the history of India unless you understand the crucial role of the Himalayan range, how it protected India from invaders, how the Himalayan passes actually allowed invaders to come in. So the history of migration is shaped by geography. So the humanities curriculum is an opportunity to teach it as a whole. And you are not teaching key economic theory. You are teaching understanding about things like what is money? How does money function? Why does a ruler need money? What are taxes? Why does a ruler need to charge taxes? How does he charge taxes? So that is the sort of economic concept which we do anyway. It would have been taught in history anyway, but you are now doing it deliberately. The teacher knows that, okay, this is a concept that belongs to economics. So these are the three strands and the subjects that they relate to. The strands are then further divided into substrands. So, for example, the people strand is divided into community, identity, money and trade, rights and responsibilities. What is community? In community, the learners compare the variations between communities. They analyze the allocation of power and control. They look at different kinds of power structures. They compare different rules between communities, how communities function differently. And they also examine different approaches to rule breaking. So, how do different communities deal with law and the breaking of rules? When it comes to identity, learners look at commonly held beliefs in their worldviews. They analyze the effect of the differences of worldviews. They investigate the influence of social media, community, family on worldviews. And they explore how other people develop worldviews and the fact that all worldviews are not similar and there is no real right and wrong when it comes to worldviews. In money and trade, they look at the causes of poverty, they look at some solutions for poverty, they analyze international trade, they look at government revenue, government spending, and they look at how money and trade can be used to help other people. As far as rights and responsibilities are concerned, they look at human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights, and how human rights work at local, national, and global levels. And they also look at lawmaking. Now, these are the four substrands related to people, but there is also another substrand actually for all the strands, that is the skill substrand. Now, in the people's strand, the skills that they look at, they learn to analyze the impact of worldviews and they look at how to collect data. In the past, which is history as we typically know it, in the arts and science substrand, they look at the role that art, fashion, design has had on society. They look at the impact of scientific discoveries and what are the challenges that scientists faced, and how did these discoveries actually impact and shape the world. They look at belief and culture and how beliefs were used for change, for control, how culture changes, how culture can impact different movements. They look at conflict and resolution. So they look at the types of conflict that happen, the impact of conflict, how have human organizations tried to prevent conflict. In the economy and communications, they explore past economies through trade, trade routes, industrial revolutions, and they see how technology and communication has had an impact on the economy. When they look at migrations and empires, they explore how empires have developed, how colonization has happened, and what is the impact of migration. In society and daily life, they look at social change, what triggers social change. They look at the concept of childhood. They look at how life was in the past, and they look at different types of governance. And in the past skill toolbox, they learn how to construct historical questions, they learn how to develop historical arguments, they learn how to look at historical sources and to analyze historical sources. So it's not as if every source is valid. It's not as if every source is equally relevant. They learn how to analyze interpretations of the past. They learn chronological skills and critical thinking. In the places strand, economic development, they look at global employment patterns, they look at sustainability in terms of economic development. They look at the environment, where they examine biodiversity, ecosystems, and the impact of changes in the human environment. In living places, they look at population growth, population distribution, how have these changed, what features have had an impact on this. In physical features and processes, this is core geography. Why do landscapes change? What are the processes that make uh, change physical features? For example, tectonic hazards. In population and health, they look at global population and health changes. In sustainability, they look at the challenges of sustainability. In transport and travel, they look at transport systems, and then they link this to climate change and sustainability as well. In weather and climate, they look at, what is the difference between weather and climate? Why do weather and climate vary? What are the weather hazards? What are the impacts of these on societies? And the skills that they actually look at is they learn to interpret images, they learn to interpret topographical and thematic maps, they conduct field work, and they select and use a range of techniques to collect data, to analyze data, and to present their data. So this in a nutshell, is actually what the entire curriculum entails, right from primary, the beginning of primary, to the end of middle school, which is stages 1 to stage 9. Now, I think there was a question in the chat box. Let me see if I can. Right, okay. No. So I'll just show you This is the people strand and the substrands. So these are the substrands and these are the skills for the people substrand. So identify different opinions, recognize the impact of worldviews, use simple data collection methods, design basic data collection tools, handle personal information responsibly. I'll focus more on the skills because I always feel skills are the most important part. As far as the past is concerned, these are the substrands. These are the things that they explore: arts and sciences, belief and cultures. And the important thing to note is this is what Cambridge tells you should be done. However, this is not set in stone. The most beautiful part of this curriculum is that there is nothing set in stone. You can actually teach whatever you want, and you can incorporate what you are already teaching within this framework. So, coming to the skills, its sources, it's asking historical questions, understanding chronology, developing a chronological framework, and examining interpretations of the past. Because you will be approaching it kind of thematically. You will select certain parts of history to teach and certain parts of history you may opt not to teach. That chronological understanding becomes very, very clear to children. Placing a particular event that you are teaching, placing it in time, in the scale of time, it becomes very clear to them. As far as the places strand is concerned, these are the substrands. And as I said, you can incorporate anything within the substrands that you would like. And the skills are very specifically related to geography, directional language, the 8-point compass, using maps and plans, photographs, inferring information from them, the skills of field work and observation, collection of data, and then the presentation of findings in a variety of ways. So I'll stop here for 2 minutes. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box. If not, just type green and I'll know that everything is clear. Wonderful. Okay. I'm just stopping for a minute to give you a chance to absorb everything I've covered. Now, the next section that we're going to look at is we're going to take a look at the learning objectives. These learning objectives are given to you by Cambridge. They are available on the School Support Hub and you can download them. I would actually encourage teachers to not only download the learning objective for, your stage, but to download and to look at all the learning objectives right from stage 1 to stage 9. Because it's very important, even if you are merely, teaching just 1 or 2 of these years, it is very important to have an understanding of the entire range of learning objectives. It will give you an understanding of how the knowledge is growing, and it will be able to help you place your teaching learning into context. You will know what they are coming up with, and you will know where they are going. Now, these learning objectives might seem a little confusing. I'm going to give you a minute to just look at what's on the screen. These are samples of learning objectives from stages 1 to 3 and stages 7 to 9. Now, unlike other subjects where Cambridge gives you, say, for example, if you look at English, Cambridge will give you a set of learning objectives for stage 1, another set of learning objectives for stage 2, and then for stage 3, and so on for every year, stages 1 to 9. So there are 9 sets of learning objectives in total. That's not how they have approached the humanities curriculum. What they have done is they have grouped the stages. So there is one set of learning objectives for stages 1, 2, and 3, another set of learning objectives for stages 4, 5, and 6, and then one set of learning objectives for stages 7, 8, and 9. Now, the reason why they have grouped it like this is because they say that you only need 1 hour a week for humanities, which comes to 30 hours a year or 90 hours per groups, stage groups. So, for example, if you are looking at stages 4, 5, and 6, you need 90 hours of teaching for those 3 years. It is not possible at all for anyone to teach all the learning objectives in a particular year. You should not try to do that, which is the reason why they have grouped it. By grouping it, they've actually made it far more flexible for the teachers. I can opt to do some of these learning objectives in stage 7, and I can opt to do the rest of them in stages 8 and then stage 9. It gives the teacher complete flexibility to design the curriculum the way they want to plan their flow of teaching the way they want to. Now, looking at the learning objectives, as I said, sometimes they may be a little confusing because there's a very strange code in front of the learning objective. Before the English sentence that actually makes sense to us, I just zoom in. Before that sentence, there's a code. And at first glance, the code doesn't really make much sense. But once we learn to decode the code and decipher it, these codes are very, very helpful. So I'm going to teach you now. I'm going to show you how we can decode these codes. So if you look at it, for example, the number, each learning objective starts with a number. That is the stage group. So in this case, in this example, it is stage 4, 5, and 6. The second, the initials relate to the strand. So PP is for people, PT is for past, and PC is for places. So for this particular learning objective, we know that it's come from the people strand. The small letters are the substrand. So in this case, RR is rights and responsibilities. So you can locate the learning objective based on the code. And then I'm going back actually. If you look at this list of learning objectives, you can see that there are several. For example, in people, if you look at the primary humanities one, in people under community, there are 6 learning objectives. So the number after the dot tells you which number learning objective. So this is objective number 1. It's the first one in this substrand. Okay, now let's look at another couple of examples. So 4, 5, 6, stage 4, 5, 6, PP belongs to the people. MT is money and trade, and 0, 1 is the first learning objective. Now, I'd like somebody else to decode the second one and put it in the chat box, and let's see how you do. I'm sure you'll do fine. Can somebody just take a guess? 789 PTSK.04. So 7, 8, and 9 would refer to the first few numbers are the stage. 7, 8, 9 is the stage. What would PT be? PT is past. SK is skills. Excellent. Pooja, wonderful. And 04 is the fourth objective. So 7, 8, 9 is the stage. PT is past. SK is skills. And 04 is the fourth learning objective. Now let's try the next one. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 obviously is the stage. PC is places. And PH is, any idea what PH might be? Population and health. Wonderful. And 02 is the second learning objective. Very good. Population and health. Great. So this is how you can decode. Now, why is this useful? Because, when we're doing our internal planning, say you are doing your long-term plan and you want to make sure that, the learning objectives are being tagged in your lesson plans or whatever. If you become adept enough and the teachers become adept enough at actually decoding, you don't need to write the whole learning objective. You can just use these codes and it becomes very easy for tracking and planning and managing to see if the learning objectives are being met. Now let's talk about structuring the course. Cambridge has left this entirely up to you. You can do it exactly how you want to do it. There are some teachers who still prefer to teach standalone units of especially history and geography. They want to do them as discrete subjects. They just want to use the Cambridge learning objectives. They want to use the Cambridge inquiries, but they want to do them as standalone subjects. That's fine. Nowhere does Cambridge tell you exactly how to teach it. So you can do them as standalone units. The second option is you can fully integrate it. You can teach it integrated as it is presented in the curriculum. The third option that some schools find a little more manageable is you can teach some units as standalone units and you can integrate some units. So for example, there are some topics that lend themselves very well to integration. Those sort of units you can do integrated. And there are other units where the history teacher or the geography teacher will say, no, this is so essential. Students need to do this thoroughly and it needs to be just about geography or just about history. Those units you can do as standalone units. This will give you the flexibility, especially when a school is starting out with the humanities curriculum. It may seem a little daunting to go fully integrated. So starting out like this might, make it a little easier for a school to kind of experiment with some integration, but have the option, if the experiment is not working, we can go back to standalone units. So that's a good way to start. And then gradually, as you become more adept and the confidence develops within the system, you can move into complete integration. Now, do we have any schools here that are actually already teaching the Cambridge curriculum? If so, just, put a thumbs up and we'd like to hear from you. So even with regards to selecting the learning objectives, there is no way you can select all the learning objectives. You can't do all of it. So you decide what you want to teach. For each stage, you select which are the learning objectives to teach. You will decide which are the time periods, what are the contexts, what are the processes you want to focus on. And as I said, you can do it standalone or you can integrate. I think Munmun had put her hand up. Would you like to unmute and share how you are approaching it? Or would you rather write it in the chat box?
Uh, Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are. You are. Yes, Munmun, please carry on.
Hello, ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good evening, ma'am, and
Good
all the
evening.
other teachers here. Ma'am, I would like to tell that we are going ahead with the Cambridge curriculum, and we are not going by individual strands, like we are following an integrated one. So I
Right,
feel that that is the better approach, because if you are teaching such a vast course, you need to ensure that students have complete knowledge of each of the strands, because that help them to connect with each of the following topics. As you said, that we can't study history without economics, without sociology, without, and if we have to talk about money and trade, you need to link it with the past, that how barter system and everything influence and how we came into being. So we
yes,
go ahead with the integrated one, and as a teacher I feel this is the better option.
right. So, how many units do you do?
Units, ma'am, we try to cover all of it, but yes, due to time crunch, we have to leave few of them. But that's
Right,
why I want to do this workshop, so that I can understand how we can divide the
right. Okay, Munmun, I think you've lost your audio.
objectives for each
Um,
of our stages.
yeah, you don't need to do all of it. The curriculum is actually very, very broad. Now, why is it so broad? Because Cambridge is catering to the entire world, right? There are Cambridge schools in over 200 countries. So the requirements of a school located in India will be very different from the requirements of a school located elsewhere in the world. Cambridge has kept it broad and flexible for schools to look at their own contexts and to pick and choose the learning objectives that they want. But it's not, A, it's not relevant, B, it's not necessary. It is far too much burden on the learner if a school tries to teach all the learning objectives. So don't worry that you're not able to complete all of it. You look at your context, and each school in India also will have an individual context, right? So you look at your own context and you decide that what is more relevant for your learners. It also depends on things like, is your school doing GP? If your school is doing GP, then maybe some of the learning objectives can be done, you know, with regards to GP. Maybe there is some of it that they are developing over there, and you don't need to do in the humanities curriculum. So you need to look at your overall context, where you are located, what else is happening in school, and then select the learning objectives.
So ma'am, basically interdisciplinary approach is very important.
Yes, absolutely. Interdisciplinary approach and this vertical planning. What
Okay.
else in say for example in grade 7, what else are my learners doing? What other subjects are they learning? So, then you will decide on what are the learning objectives of the humanities curriculum. So it should not be done in isolation. It should be done in collaboration with other subjects, other teachers, to look at what is the load of the learners, how much can they absorb, and then you decide.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, most welcome. Um, so just a reminder, these are the strands and the substrands. Now we're going to just take a look at integration. How do we want to integrate? What do we mean by integrating? How do we teach in a way where all of this is brought in together? So, for example, if you are teaching, say, the Mughal Empire, that is your topic. But through teaching the Mughal Empire, you want to teach some part of people and places as well. You can definitely touch upon learning objectives from money and trade, because revenue, tax collection, that's a very big part of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal emperors changed the methods of tax collection. So, this thing of how governments raise and spend money. What is money? Why is it important for governments to tax the people? What are these taxes used for? Those learning objectives cater to money and trade. Then, as far as the places strand is concerned, you can look at the benefits and challenges of living in a particular settlement, because the Mughal Empire was an empire that was created by many different groups of people. There was a lot of migration that happened at that point. There were a lot of different settlements, a lot of different communities within the Mughal Empire. You can look at migration, you can look at the impact that migration has on a country. And, you know, then obviously you have to teach the history part of it, which is the rise of the empire, the end of an empire. You can focus on architecture, culture. All of this can be done through one topic. So the way to do it is you look at the topics that you want to teach, and then you look at the learning objectives that come in naturally. You are not actually reinventing anything. You need to just sit, take a look at the curriculum that you are currently teaching and see how it can be adapted. It just needs to be, you know, brought in. This just needs to be made explicit. For example, there is no history teacher who teaches the Mughal Empire without teaching about taxation or without teaching about the impact of um, architecture, about culture, about migration. All of this is done when the Mughal Empire is done. It is just about making it explicit, about first the teacher recognizing that these are learning objectives coming in from different strands and making it explicit to the students. Another example. So, for example, if the topic that you are currently doing is volcanoes, how do you turn that into an integrated unit? You will, first of all, teach the physical processes of, a volcano. How is a volcano formed? What are these tectonic hazards? How does it lead to a volcano forming? And then what happens when the volcano erupts? You can then look at past eruptions. So, for example, there are some very famous eruptions that happened in the past. Notably, say, for example, you could choose Pompeii. And when you're doing that, you can do the Roman Empire. The impact of that eruption on the Roman Empire, the impact of that eruption on the town of Pompeii. How did life change because of that eruption? So you're bringing in some aspects of history over there, and you can also talk about the impact on poverty, how it causes poverty, how it has an economic impact. Also, it leads to displacement of people and how people need to be resettled. So, again, through one particular topic that you are already teaching, you can just modify the teaching to turn it into an integrated unit. So, it's not very difficult. You are not adding a whole lot more. These are things that are already being done. It's again just a question of recognizing and making it a little more explicit. There's another example of integration. This comes from a Cambridge resource. The inquiry question is, why did people stop moving and start farming? So just off the bat, first question, can anybody tell me which stage this inquiry belongs to? Which stage would it be? Look at the learning objectives. It's stage 6, it's 7, 8, 9, right? Because it starts with 7, 8, 9, so we know that it's stage 7, 8, 9. So this inquiry, which is there available for you to use on the Cambridge website, It caters to all three strands. You've got people, past, and places. And it has learning objectives from all three strands. But if you look at it, it has only one learning objective from people. It's got two learning objectives from the past, and it's got three learning objectives from places. That's absolutely fine. Not every inquiry has to have the same number of learning objectives. The focal point of every inquiry does not have to be equal between the three strands. It could be that I'll just bring in one aspect. I'm going back to the volcanoes. I'm just bringing in one small aspect of Pompeii over here. The main learning objectives are based on geography and economics. I am just correlating one small aspect of the past. Similarly, over here, in this inquiry question about the start of farming, it's just one small aspect of people that is being incorporated. The bulk of the learning objectives are coming from the past and from places. Not all will be equal. It does not have to be like that. Now, again, time for a RAG rating. If you have any question, please put it in the chat box. Otherwise, just type in green or put some sort of a green icon for me to know that everything is clear. And again, I'll just stop for a minute to let you absorb everything and jot down some points. Pooja, I will answer the question on lesson plans. We have an entire section on lesson planning. Just hold on till then. Okay. Now moving on to the resources that are available. So Cambridge realizes that this is a new approach and it has given a lot of resources for teachers to use. Now, these resources are primarily in two places. They are all digital resources. One set of resources are available on Cambridge Go, okay, which is the digital version of the Cambridge books. If you buy Cambridge books, you are able to get a Cambridge Go subscription. Over there, you will find these three digital teachers resource for the three stages. For humanities, stages 1 to 3, primary stages 1 to 3, primary stages 4, 5, and 6, and lower secondary stages 7, 8, and 9. Now, let's just look at them. What does this digital teachers resource contain? So it contains inquiries, which is it's like an entire lesson plan, an inquiry plan. It contains PPTs, it contains worksheets, it contains a lot of teaching ideas. And each inquiry is structured in a way where it contains a starter idea, it contains main teaching ideas, it contains a plenary wrap-up idea, it gives you step-by-step guidance, it gives you resources that are curated, it gives you worksheets to use in class, it gives you worksheets for homework, and it gives you links to videos that you can use in class as well. So just taking a look at it. So for example, the first picture is the inquiry. The inquiries are incredibly detailed. It gives you a summary. It gives you the main inquiry question. It tells you the teaching time. It gives you all the learning objectives. It gives you the success criteria. It also tells you how to modify the inquiry to make it longer or shorter, how to modify the inquiry to make it more challenging or less challenging. It gives you an idea for a starting activity. It gives you an idea for the main teaching activity, for the plenary session. It tells you how learners can select to represent their work. It's an entire package. You don't need anything more than this inquiry from the digital teacher's resource. Because these inquiries also come with, say, for example, you can see here in the middle is a worksheet. And it comes with a reflection sheet also. It also guides the teacher on how the reflection should be done. Reflection is needed to be done at all stages. It's built into all stages of the inquiry cycle. And there are resources to help the teacher, to guide the teacher in how the reflection can be done. So this is an example of worksheets and an inquiry for stages 1 to 3. Let us look at stages 4, 5, and 6. Similarly, it contains everything that a teacher might need: the starter, the main, the plenary ideas, the step-by-step guidance, resources to use in class. So you've got the inquiry over here. You've got the worksheets that can be used in class or at home, and you've got a PPT that can be used in class for teaching. Stages 7, 8, and 9 similarly contains everything: the inquiry, worksheets, and you can see how the worksheet, the levels are changing because it changes grade appropriate. The other thing that the inquiry contains is suggestions for differentiation, and it tells you how you can adapt the plan that has been given to you. It tells you what are the possible misconceptions that a learner might have about a topic. It tells you what is the vocabulary work that might need to be done with different levels of learners. So it actually gives you all the guidance you need. There's very little or there's nothing actually that you need beyond the pack that is given to you for an inquiry. You can just take this and run with it. You don't need to do any further preparation. The only thing that you might need to do is you may need to adapt it. Say, for example, if the inquiry is designed for 8 hours, but you have only 5 hours, that also the inquiry contains a suggestion of how to cut it down or how to expand it. So you just need to follow the suggestion that is given in the inquiry. So these are the resources that are available on Cambridge Go. Now, if you move to the School Support Hub, there are many more resources. There's a teacher's guide, which gives you advice for how to approach the curriculum. There is an inquiry approach guide, which tells you how to carry out an inquiry. There is the curriculum framework. There are the learning objectives. So everything that you need to start teaching the Cambridge Humanities curriculum is available on the School Support Hub. Now let's just take a look at what do we mean by inquiry. Why am I talking so much about inquiry? Because the Cambridge Humanities curriculum is an inquiry curriculum. We are meant to use the inquiry approach while teaching Cambridge Humanities. Now, I'm just going to ask a question and I'd like responses in the chat box. What do I mean by the inquiry approach? What is your understanding of the inquiry approach? Just type in your responses or unmute yourselves and share. Could we have some responses? What do we mean by the inquiry approach?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, Lorraine.
Yes.
Please carry on.
Okay. To me, I feel that the inquiry approach is a teaching method where
Yes.
students learn by, say, asking questions or sharing of ideas or discovering answers, themselves. rather than only listening to the teacher or what the teacher is explaining every time.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It is something that is self-directed learning. It is not teacher-driven learning, it's student-driven learning. Absolutely. And they are answering questions to understand why, how, and what Sudeshna has written. Yes, means learning through questioning and exploring information. Right. It's an investigation-driven approach where you explore and research and then you share information around a particular question led by students. Absolutely. I'll just answer McJoyle's question. The CUP resources on Cambridge Go are, yes, similar to the ones on School Support Hub. So, for example, McJoyle, you'll get sample inquiries in both the School Support Hub and in Cambridge Go. But there are some resources on the School Support Hub that are not available on Cambridge Go. Say, for example, all the learning objectives are not there on Cambridge Go. You need to be a Cambridge registered school. If you are registered with Cambridge, every teacher should have access to the School Support Hub. So if your school is a Cambridge school and you are offering a Cambridge program, please go to the Cambridge coordinator of your school to ask for access to the School Support Hub. No Cambridge teacher should be teaching without access to the School Support Hub. There is a lot of information and a lot of resources on the School Support Hub. And maybe if we have time at the end, I can open up the School Support Hub and show you what we have available over there. So coming back to the inquiry question. Okay, Sneha has a question. You can access Cambridge Go by when you purchase Cambridge books, when the school purchases Cambridge books, you can get a subscription. And I'm sure Ishani will be able to talk about Cambridge Go at the end and help you get a subscription to Cambridge Go. So Pushp has said it's like an investigative approach where you ask questions, explore, and analyze to understand something better. Absolutely. Now, the inquiry approach is an approach where students actively explore, investigate, and question to construct their own understanding and knowledge. And for me, this part of it, this construct their own understanding and knowledge, is absolutely crucial. The most important thing that we need to realize as Cambridge teachers is that Cambridge follows the constructivist pedagogy. What does that mean? The constructivist pedagogy is a pedagogical approach, it's a theory, it's a psychological theory which says learners learn best when they construct their own understanding, not when understanding is given to them from a teacher, but when they construct it for themselves. Now, how does a learner construct understanding? A learner can only construct understanding when they are doing it themselves. So, a teacher can stand at the head of a classroom when we were all in school, when we were kids, most of us. What was the approach of a teacher? The teacher stood at the head of the classroom and taught, gave a lecture. And the students could either absorb what the teacher was saying or not. That kind of approach is very outdated. Today, we realize that learners need to do it themselves. When they build understanding for themselves, that understanding stays with them. That understanding sustains over a long period of time. And the inquiry-based approach is one of the best ways for learners to construct their own understanding. So what does this mean? What do you do? There is something called the inquiry cycle. Now, this in the next section, you can make out that I have just, screenshotted certain things and put them on the PPT. This is the inquiry guide. I've taken it deliberately from the Cambridge Inquiry Guide for you to see the amount of support that is available. The inquiry guide is available on School Support Hub, and it tells you step by step how to take a learner through an entire inquiry. So there are many different types of doing inquiry. Cambridge has a very simple 4-step method. You start with getting curious, you trigger curiosity in the learner, then they explore and they analyze the topic that they are learning, then they share their learning, and then they come to a point of what's next. So either they can go deeper into the same unit or you move on to the next unit. So for example, if we are looking at the people strand, stages 4 to 6, and our learning objectives are analyze the role and purpose of money, analyze the ways in which people can spend their money in order to meet their needs. Now, in the get curious stage, you can explore if essential and non-essential objects make you happy. So once you trigger that curiosity and once the learners start exploring this, you can ask the learners to develop an inquiry question. So for example, the inquiry question here could be, does money make you happy? So once the inquiry question is framed, now the learners have to research in order to answer the inquiry question. So learners, you guide them. What is the best way to do this research? How am I going to investigate? They will actually carry out the research. They can, for example, over here, they can consider what is money? How is money made? How can I find out if money makes somebody happy? In order to answer this question, I need to collect data. What sort of data do I need to collect? So these are all questions that the learners will grapple with, they will figure out, they will do the research, they'll collect the data. Once they have finished doing their research, they have to share their findings. So they have to answer a question. Now they could answer this question in a variety of ways. And it is up to the learner, preferably in consultation with the teacher, to decide how the learning is to be presented. So it could be presented as a presentation, it could be turned into a podcast, somebody could make a PPT, somebody could write a paper. I would always recommend giving that choice to the learner. After some of the learning has been shared, then there is the what's next. Is there anything more you want to find out? Do you want to go deeper into this inquiry? Have all your questions been answered? If all the questions have been answered, you move on to the next. You close this inquiry and move on to the next. Otherwise, you do another inquiry circle with a new question that has developed out of the result of the research that students have done. Now, these are the 4 steps: get curious, explore, share, and what's next. But the 5th step is actually embedded in each of these 4. At every stage, the learner has to reflect. So when it is get curious, you have to, in order to frame an inquiry question, they have to reflect. When they come up with an inquiry, even then they have to reflect, is this inquiry question good? Can I improve this inquiry question? When they are exploring, they need to reflect, is this the best way to explore? If they are looking at a source, for example, they need to reflect, is this source valid? When they are sharing their information, they need to reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses. How do I present information better? Am I better verbally? Am I better when I put things down on writing? So this reflection is inbuilt at all stages. They need to reflect. Another very quick example of an inquiry. So for example, if the topic is how has people power changed the world? So the get curious could be you trigger it by asking what causes society to change. And you have a discussion with them about that. You trigger their curiosity and they come up with this inquiry question of how has people power changed the world. Then you can go into a particular case study, or you could break the class and give them different case studies. Or you could ask each group to select their own case study. The flexibility is there for you to do however, you feel fit, depending on your cohort. Then they will discuss in groups and present their findings. And then what's next? They could perhaps look at people power in the past compared to people power today. Are there any recent examples of people power? How are we as a community shaping the world today? And so on and so forth. The inquiry could either continue, it could deepen, or you can switch to a new inquiry. This is a breakdown. Now, this is not there in the Cambridge resource. It's available on the internet. It is a breakdown of, a variety of questions that students can ask or the teacher can ask at the different stages to help deepen the inquiry, to help make it more robust. So, for example, right at the start, it could be, what do I want to know about this topic? What do I already know? What more do I want to know? Um, what could an answer be once the question is framed? A hypothesis about what the answer could possibly be. Then finding the resources. What kind of resources would help? How do they know that the information in a particular resource is valid? Where can they find the information? Then when they're interpreting the information, is it relevant? Does it relate to my question? How does this information support my answer? What does not support my answer? Does this information raise any new questions? And then when it comes to reporting the finding, the kids can ask, what is my main point? What else is important? What are the sub points? How does all my information connect together? Who is my audience? Who am I presenting this to? And what is the best way to express my message or my findings? So these are questions that actually just help the reflection of all the four stages of the inquiry process. Now, as I've told you, there are sample inquiries ready-made for each stage. There are many inquiries and there are constantly new inquiries being added on. So these are available both on Cambridge Go and on the School Support Hub. These ready-made inquiries are there. So for example, I'll just take you through one inquiry. You'll see the summary and the inquiry question. The teaching time is given. The learning objectives are given. The teaching ideas. So these are the ideas for a starting activity. And you're also told what resources you need. So, it's really, it just lays it out for you so clearly that all you need is you take the inquiry, read it, and you can start teaching. These are the main teaching ideas. And on top over there, you have the resource that you need that you will perhaps display in class when, you're introducing the main teaching ideas to the students. Again, there are starter ideas, main teaching ideas, a plenary idea. You can see over here, these are all snippets of various inquiries at various stages, showing how Cambridge actually just gives you everything that you need. And there are further downloadable resources. So there's a curriculum framework correlation, how the resources map to the framework. There is a guide to the inquiry-led approach. There's a letter for parents introducing and explaining the aim behind the humanities curriculum. And there are lesson plan templates, which Pooja, we will look at the lesson plan templates and we'll talk about how to plan. Now, before we move on to active learning, again, just if there are any questions, please put them in the chat box. Or if everything is okay, just let me know. Okay. Okay. Sneha, I will address your query. The humanities curriculum is very different from GP. In some ways, there is a little bit of overlap as far as the skills are concerned. So, for example, in the GP curriculum, there are sources where learners look at, is this source valid? Is this a reliable source? That same skill is required in humanities as well. Okay. Apart from that, the two are very, very different. GP is very heavily skill based. The humanities curriculum is concept based. It develops very different concepts that GP does not develop. The humanities curriculum is mapped to further progression into IGCSE with history, with geography, with economics, and sociology and psychology. Whereas GP is mapped to further progression into GP itself. So it's not as if students who do GP in lower secondary, the mapping into IGCSE, history, geography, etc., it's not meant to be mapped that way. There is, as I said, some overlap as far as skills are concerned, but the concepts that we deal with in the humanities curriculum are core humanities concepts. As a teacher, I myself teach IGCSE history, I teach global perspectives as well, and they are vastly different subjects. They do not overlap with each other, as apart from the essential skills that are common, academic skills. So Sneha, they're very different.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question, Sneha.
No, the very fact that you mentioned about the progression, I think that clarified a lot. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so
yes,
much.
you're most welcome. Most welcome. I know that, for schools, it's always the challenge for schools is always time. Let's be honest. We all know that the challenge for schools is always time. It's about how can we fit so much into the curriculum. But if you don't do humanities, whether you do it as standalone or you do it as integrated, your learners are not going to be able to, once they reach IGCSE, they will not have the key concepts in place. If we try to substitute global perspectives for humanities or humanities for global perspectives, there will be a disconnect. So I would suggest, as the head of a school, my thinking is, even if I don't give that much time to either global perspectives or humanities, they should feature somewhere in my lower secondary curriculum, just so that learners who are taking up these subjects at IGCSE have a base ready to, rely on, and they're not starting from scratch, because we all know how fast the 2 years of the IGCSE curriculum goes. So it is worth spending a little bit of time in the lower secondary, in middle school, to build that base. Okay, let's move on now to take a look at active learning. Now, active learning, all Cambridge teachers know that Cambridge follows the active learning approach. Active learning is where learners are actively involved, actually involved in their learning, hands-on. So what do learners do in an active learning classroom? These are some of the things they discuss. There's group work, there's a lot of class discussion, they brainstorm, there are, mind maps, they problem solve, they research, they carry out surveys, there's a lot of role play, there's a lot of movement inside the classroom, and learners go outside. Active learning is also when learners are just mentally engaged. So a learner could just be sitting at their table quietly. If they are mentally engaged, that is also active learning. So I know that for a lot of teachers, active learning is just these things that are there on the screen. That is, activity. But active learning actually means a learner is mentally engaged. Now, what is the correlation between the inquiry-based approach and active learning? Both active learning and the inquiry-based approach require exploration. They require inquiry on the part of the learner. They inquire hands-on activities, and the learner takes a central role in constructing their understanding rather than passively receiving the information. I've already spoken about this. The learner is not taking something given to them by the teacher. It's not that the teacher is filling the jar of the learner and the learner is just absorbing. The learner is actually perhaps more actively involved than the teacher. The teacher is facilitating the learner's learning, but the learner needs to be more active and take responsibility to construct their own understanding. And this is not easy, this requires learners to this needs to be taught to them from the start how to construct their own understanding. And because Cambridge believes in the constructivist philosophy, this is not only in the humanities curriculum. This needs to be done in all subjects across disciplines, this constructivist approach. So the learner in your classroom is hopefully learning in a similar way cross subjects, not just in your humanities classroom. So when you're doing the inquiry-based approach, you start the class with a question to spark their curiosity. Now, based on their answers, you guide the students to frame their own inquiry question about a topic. Then you guide them to do the research. You encourage collaborative learning while all of this is happening. They should be working in groups, and you guide them on how to present their research. Now let's just take a look at inquiry questions, because not all inquiry questions are the same. There are different types of inquiry questions. There are factual questions. For example, what has been the pattern of global population change? This is a question based on facts. There are conceptual questions. What processes contribute to population change? So a conceptual question will prompt analysis. It's more application based. It encourages students to explore relationships between concepts. It's much broader than a factual question, which is more narrow. And a debatable question is, should governments try to control the size of their population? This is something that stimulates discussion. It stimulates debate. Now, all three are valid questions. But these three questions need to be used at different times. Now, depending on the stage, you can either choose to go with a factual question or a conceptual question. In the higher stages, if you have more time, you can do conceptual questions because that would lead to deeper learning. Because if you look at that conceptual question, what processes contribute to population change, you will need to answer the factual question as well in order to truly answer the conceptual question. So the conceptual question is broader and it encompasses factual questions within it as well. But if you have very little time, or if your cohort is just learning how to do research, maybe then you stick to a factual question. And the debatable questions could be when you want to stimulate the class, when you want to trigger a discussion, you want to trigger a debate, then you focus on the debatable questions. Students will come up with all three types of questions. And you need to train the students to understand the differences between the factual question, the conceptual question, and the debatable question. And you suggest, no, if they come up with a factual question, you suggest to them, can we make this a conceptual question? Or the debatable question, that's not your main inquiry question. That's just one question that you discuss while you're doing the inquiry. It's a part of the inquiry, but it's not the main inquiry question. because the purpose is not just to have a debate, it's to actually find out, more deeper information and to develop their knowledge base around a certain concept. So these are the different types of inquiry questions. Now, what is the role of a teacher? So the students are very, very active. Does not mean that the teacher sits back and does her corrections in the inquiry-based classroom. So in the inquiry-based classroom, the teacher needs to constantly be with the kids to move around the classroom to guide their exploration. So you need to know what each table is discussing. You need to know their thought process, how their ideas are developing. If you find that they are stuck at some point, it's the teacher's role to ask thought-provoking questions, to prompt further discussion. To don't give them a question as an inquiry question, but you ask them a question which will lead to an inquiry question, which will lead to further discussion. If they are stuck, the teacher can suggest where to find further resources. Maybe you could take in a pack of resources and give each table a pack of resources to work through. Or if your kids have access to the laptop, or if they have access to an ICT lab, you could guide them on where to go and get their research. You may find that the thinking that they are doing is not critical enough. So you could ask questions to trigger more critical thinking and also create a collaborative learning environment, because this is work done in groups, not individually. And we all know how difficult it can be sometimes to get kids to work in groups and to collaborate with each other. So even there, the teacher needs to play the role of the mediator, the facilitator, and to help the kids learn to work together. Um, we're going to look at assessments next. Now, all of this sounds very good, but how do we assess it? How do you, at the end of an inquiry, know whether learners have actually learned or not? So there are a variety of ways actually. Some of these are very formal, some of them are informal. So for example, your observation of the class, of what the students are doing, that's an informal way of assessment. And you are always constantly observing them. You can ask them questions, and based on their responses, you know whether they're actually doing the work or not. Peer assessment, when they're working in groups, I would strongly recommend that you teach students to give feedback to each other. That's a very, very important skill that we often leave too late in life, how to give feedback to somebody else. I think students need to learn this skill as early as possible. So to assess each other and give feedback to each other, presentations, portfolios, journals, these can be more formal ways of assessing. And self-assessment, that is also another very important skill. How did I do in this inquiry? What did I contribute? Could I have done something better? So that sort of self-assessment is another way of monitoring a learner's progress. The inquiries that are available on the Cambridge website have ideas for assessment. So for each inquiry, based on what is being done in the inquiry, there are ideas for assessment. Now, I'd just like to give you an opportunity to share some of your ideas. What are, uh, all learning, and that's the reason why I put down over here, write a poem, write a song, perform a skit. I once went in to observe a science class where the teacher had asked students to create a model of an atom. And she told them you can do it in any way. So there were some students that had baked a cake as a model. They had baked a cake and shaped it as the model of an atom. There were some students that had actually knitted something as a model of an atom. Students don't always have to write an answer for it to be counted as assessment. These forms of assessment also test if a student has learned. Sometimes it tests it even deeper. Because especially in this day and age, ChatGPT can write that answer for you, but ChatGPT cannot actually bake a cake for you. So if you are going to actually do something out of the box, that's not pen and paper, sometimes that is a better, way to gauge whether a learner has learned something. So please write your responses in the chat box about some other ideas that you have for assessment. Anything that you do in class that is different, that's a little unique, creative. Or if you would rather unmute yourselves. Students in a science class use bread, Nutella, and gummy bears to show the model of a cell. Wonderful. Really wonderful. And this makes learning so enjoyable for the students because I'm sure they would have absolutely loved this activity. Thank you, Sneha. That's quite interesting. Anyone else has a unique idea? Wow, Lorraine, that's lovely. Fancy dress competition to show the different people and cultures. Yes. So all of this is valid assessment. Loads of stories while teaching. Yes. Yes. Yeah. To be an entrepreneur and a Shark Tank event. Yes. So all of this is valid assessment. Actually, a teacher can use anything as an assessment.
Ma'am,
Um,
I would like to share something.
yes, Lorraine.
We were doing a topic on places like Mumbai. So I got the children to make groups, and we did a lot about the street food of Mumbai. So they had got food from home, and where we had a sharing kind of thing, and children also gave in their ideas about the kind of street food that was sold in Mumbai and how it was prepared. So they had menu cards made, and we kind of made a whole classroom with all
How
sorts of
lovely.
different food, yeah, uh, brought in from their homes.
How lovely. Yeah. And don't you find that the students are just engaged at an entirely different level? Like the level of engagement goes up, not just on that day, but just before and after the event as well.
Yes, they came out
It
with
has a
wonderful
spill-on
ideas.
effect. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So please don't feel as if your assessment has to always be read-write assessment. It could be a variety of ways. But of course, you could also use read-write. Like for example, for tests and summative assessment, etc., you would need to do a written assessment, and that is perfectly valid in the inquiry approach. At the end of it, you could have a written assessment because there is enough learning that you will assess formally as well. Okay, we're going to now move quickly on to planning. So just before we move on, do you have any questions that you'd like me to address over here? Okay. Um, I'll move on to planning. Now, you can use the teacher's resources to plan. There is a lesson planning sequence that Cambridge advises. You first plan the learning intentions and the success criteria, the learning objectives that you have selected. Then you plan the language support. You plan your starter activities. You plan the main activities, the assessment. You plan the differentiation. And then you plan the reflection, the plenary, and the homework. So this is the flow for planning that is required. Now, what do we mean by language support? Language support would be um, like a vocabulary bank for each inquiry. So, for example, if I am teaching the impact of architecture, there may be some specific terminology that the students may be unfamiliar with. If your classroom is very mixed and you have a cohort of students for whom English is a second language, then you would need to plan for extra support for those students. So knowing your cohort, what are the language support, and knowing the unit that is being taught, what is the language support that they would need? It is basically just a teacher stopping to think before going into the classroom, what is it that the students are going to find difficult? Now, Cambridge gives you a lesson plan template. This lesson plan template is available on the School Support Hub. It's available in Cambridge Go as well. The subheadings, the section headings of the lesson plan template are the learning intentions, success criteria, the resources that you need to use, language support, including key vocabulary that you need in order to teach a particular inquiry, then the introduction of the lesson, the main activities, what is the assessment that will be done, what is the differentiation that will be done, what is the plenary activity, what is the reflection, and any homework activities. And the lesson plan also has a section for notes. And what we use that for is after you've taught the lesson, that's your reflection. How did the lesson go? What do you need to do differently next time? So that is a space for you to jot down your notes. Now, it depends on school to school, right? Again, Cambridge does not tell you, it's mandatory to use exactly this lesson plan template. You can modify the lesson plan template based on the requirements of your school. So, for example, if your school is a school where everybody is a first language English learner, where language support is not that important because your learners do have a certain level of English fluency, maybe you don't need to think of language support. Okay. If your school is a school which has a very mixed cohort, you have some brilliant children, but you also have some children with special needs, then maybe differentiation needs to be focused on even more than perhaps some other school. So the lesson plan that you create and how much focus you pay to each of these sections depends on your school's context. But the way to plan essentially is first you select your learning objectives, then the learning intentions and the success criteria, and then the rest of it follows. Now, I'll just take you through planning for one particular inquiry. So the inquiry is, what is this country like? Which could also be, what is my country like? The inquiry is set for 7 hours. And basically, the aim of the inquiry is that learners will investigate the country in which they live. They learn about the landscape features, the physical features, and the different types of settlements. So first, you have to plan the learning intentions and the success criteria. So you select the learning objectives. The inquiry, if you are just looking at the Cambridge inquiry that is available on the website, there's a whole host of learning objectives and success criteria. You could do all of them, or you could select some of them, depending on which stage are you doing it, because it's a stage group, right? So are you doing it at stage 6 or are you doing it at stage 8? It will, obviously, there'll be a difference at the level. So depending on the stage, depending on the cohort, on your learners, you will select the learning objectives, you will select the success criteria. Then you will plan the language support. So you need to think about and you need to ask yourself certain questions. And you need to create like this vocabulary bank if your learners need it. What is a beach? What is a village? What is a country? What is the countryside? What are the physical features? What is the meaning of rural? What is the meaning of a settlement? So what is the language support that you need to provide to your learners in order for them to be able to understand this unit? So you plan that language support. Then you plan the starter activities. You could go with what is written in the inquiry, or you could select your own starter activity. Then you plan the main teaching activities. And please note that for each of these, there is a time limit. So, for example, if you're doing, as suggested by the inquiry, if you're doing a treasure hunt, that's for 15 minutes. If you are doing a discussion about what do we already know about this country, the time suggested is 30 minutes. But as I told you earlier, when you look at the inquiry, they will give you suggestions of how to shorten the unit or to make it longer. So you can adapt it to your requirements. Then you will plan the assessment for learning. What is it? And you can do assessment for learning, assessment of learning, depending on your school, your context, what you want to do. So the different types of assessment you could look at and the different types of differentiation that is needed. Some students may need more hand holding, some students may need more language support, some students may need something a little more challenging because they're very advanced learners. Knowing your cohort, you need to plan that differentiation. Then you plan the reflection and the plenary. As I told you, you have the PPT ready. So, for example, if the plenary is to show the questions on the slide, everything is given to you already. You don't need to create your own resources. And then you plan the homework. Again, the worksheet is given. You could go with the worksheet that is given. You could go with the PPT that is given. You could create your own, entirely up to you. Now, you can adapt the inquiry, and support for adapting the curriculum, adapting the inquiry is given on in these various documents. The teacher guide tells you how to adapt the inquiry. The inquiry approach guide also tells you how to adapt the inquiries. So you don't need to teach it the way it is given. You could adapt it to your own desired method. Now, I think it was Poonam who had a question earlier about inquiries. Yes, I will tell you how to find these resources in the School Support Hub. Poonam, does this answer your question on planning? Or is there anything further? Pooja, sorry, Pooja. Does this answer your question on planning, or do you have any further questions? Okay. Does anybody else have any further questions about planning? Okay, so if there are no questions about planning, I'm going to just take you into the School Support Hub. Just give me a minute and I'll share screen again. So is this visible? Is my screen visible? So when you go into the School Support Hub, those of you that are familiar with the School Support Hub, you know that the School Support Hub has changed. It has recently updated. So when you go into the School Support Hub, you need to actually select your subjects. So you will need to go into whichever you're doing, Cambridge Primary, lower secondary, or IGCSE, whatever, qualification you are teaching. You will need to, from subjects, select global humanities, or, whichever subject you want the resources for. So, for example, I have already pre-selected humanities. So once you go into the humanities resources, these are the resources. So you can see over here, they have just published more past inquiries. which are available in the Teaching and Learning tab. On top over here, these tabs where my cursor, if you can see my cursor, you've got the subject home, where you get all the important notifications. There is the overview about the humanities curriculum and the curriculum framework, about how the curriculum can be adapted, about the skills that can be there, how to develop. All of these are, uh, the different skills that are used in the humanities curriculum. There is the teacher's guide. There is the guide to the inquiry approach. There are sample inquiries, and there is assessment guidance. So all of this support material is available. If you click on Resource Finder, which is their collection of resources, so these are all the resources. There's assessment guidance, there's the curriculum framework, there's the inquiry template, these are the learning objectives. Then there's the learning objectives exemplification, which basically just explains the learning objectives in more detail. Then there's a document with only the learning objectives, which you can use for planning purposes. There's the lesson plan template. Then there are all the example inquiries which are zipped together. There's the teacher's guide. There's the inquiry approach guide. There's a curriculum mapping guide. Then implementing the Cambridge with Cambridge is not really about the humanities curriculum. It's about, in general, how to teach the Cambridge way, how to, follow the Cambridge approach. Then there's a long-term planning template, a medium-term planning template, and a short-term planning template, and a mapping template. These are a lot of resources. You will not really need anything. Now, if you go into teaching and learning, you are able to filter out these resources. Some are for teaching and learning, some are for various other resources. And for the guidance, you know, administration, so that's the assessment part of it. So, and upcoming events is the trainings that are available. So you can see that on the 3rd of June, there is a Cambridge Lower Secondary Humanities training that is available. So this is how the School Support Hub, I'll just go back to Resource Finder and teaching and learning, planning and preparation. You can see there is a wealth of resources actually that's available on the School Support Hub. Now, I believe that there are some schools that are not giving the teachers access to School Support Hub. It's very difficult for teachers to teach without the School Support Hub. So if you are a Cambridge school, if you are offering the Cambridge program, you have, a login into the School Support Hub. Your Cambridge coordinator just needs to create a login ID for you as a teacher. So please go to the Cambridge coordinator and say that you need access to the School Support Hub, because there is no textbook, there is no physical textbook for the humanities curriculum. The resources are all digital resources. There are no checkpoints for the humanities curriculum. Checkpoints are there for English, math, science, and global perspectives, not there for humanities. Okay, I'll just share my screen again and go back to my PPT. So, adapting the inquiry, you've seen where there are resources, and the resources tell you, exactly how all the different ways in which the inquiries can be adapted. Now we're coming to the last part, which is the PD part of it. In order to improve the learner's classroom experience, PD is very, very important. Now, this webinar is not really counted as PD because it gives you an overview of the curriculum, but it doesn't focus on improving classroom practice, right? There is a lot of other PD available about which will help you improve your competency as a teacher and will help you improve your classroom practice. Now, what is teacher PD? It's a structured activity for teachers to increase their ability. And PD actually, if you look at it, it comes from a need to improve teaching learning and it results in improved learning outcomes. So if you engage in a well-structured, proper PD, it actually results in improved learning outcomes. There is a course from Cambridge called Preparing to Teach. Preparing to Teach is a very useful course because it improves your knowledge of resources, it improves your knowledge of the curriculum. This knowledge can then be cascaded and shared with other teachers in the department. Teachers gain confidence and it leads to improved learning outcomes. Other types of PD is available. There is getting started with guides. These are free guides available on the Cambridge website. Self-study guides, so you have getting started with active learning, you have, getting started with metacognition, different key things that teachers need to know in order to teach the Cambridge way. Then there are orientations. So for example, this is an orientation to the humanities curriculum. The other ones are actually structured PD. So there is an introductory level PD, which are courses for teachers new to Cambridge. Then for teachers who have some experience, there is focus on progress. What a Cambridge classroom looks like is for secondary teachers, it's an enrichment workshop. And preparing to teach, what I spoke about earlier, it's for coordinators or leaders to help them cascade the learning through their departments. So these are some of the options for PD available with Cambridge, and you could, opt for one of these to improve your practice. This is a QR code for the Cambridge University Press website. Please scan and save the QR code. There are a lot of resources available here on this website. The next is the Cambridge International website. Again, where you will find trainings, where you will find information about the curriculum. So please scan and save this QR code for the website. And this is very, very important because these are the getting started with guides. So this takes you to a link where all the getting started with guides, and these are all free. These are like, it's a self-paced PD that you can do on your own. And they're very useful. These are wonderful guides. So please make sure you save particularly this one. Now coming back to an overview of what we've done today. So hopefully you now have a clear understanding of the Cambridge primary curriculum, primary and lower secondary humanities curriculum. You know what teachers' resources are available and how to use the teachers' resources, where to find them. You have an understanding of the inquiry-based approach and how to assess inquiry-based learning. You are confident about planning and you know about all the different resources that are available. You know where to get information about how to adapt an inquiry to your requirements, where further support is available on the Cambridge Go website as well as the Cambridge School Support Hub, and what are the next steps for professional development that you can engage in. Do you have any questions about any of this? Or any questions about the curriculum, how to deliver it, how to plan for it, anything that we've spoken about? this. Let me just check. Okay. So if there are no questions, that brings us to the end of the session. Yes, Sneha, the Cambridge bit has been addressed. Which Cambridge bit, Sneha? If you unmute yourself and explain to me, I can take you through it again.
The bit where you said at the end of it, Miss Ishani, if I'm correct, would take us through how to subscribe for Cambridge Go.
So, Ishani, will you be able to talk about Cambridge Go?
So, ma'am, I will just share the regional Cambridge point of contacts. You can get in touch with them regarding your queries for Cambridge Go.
Sure. So, if you could put those contacts in the chat box.
Yes, I'm just putting.
Yeah. And Sneha, School Support Hub, you're familiar with?
Yes, yes. Since I'm already
Yeah,
now managing the lower
right,
secondary curriculum for
right,
about 4 years,
right.
I am
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. So School Support Hub is one resource that we can use. Cambridge Go is the other. And I think the link should come here, the contact for the regional representative for CUP. They will be able to help you with Cambridge Go. So there's a feedback link. Um, Everybody, please fill in your feedback for the session because that just helps us improve our practice. It's equally important, and it helps us tailor the webinars for your to suit you more. So just fill in the feedback link, and we're still waiting, Ishani, for the contact. So before we end, yes, of course, you can get in touch with me. Thank you so much, Sneha. Here. So Ishani has sent the contact details. You can just copy paste this. You can get in touch with me if you reach out to Ishani. I'm sure she will be able to provide you with my email ID or whatever it is. Get in touch with me through Cambridge. I'm more than happy to help any schools that need help with the Cambridge curriculum, with the humanities curriculum. And good luck to all of you. This is actually a very, very exciting curriculum. I think it's one of the most progressive curriculums that Cambridge has developed. So I really hope you are able to implement it, and good luck to all of you with your practice. See you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.